There is a submarine that should never have existed, a machine that defied all known laws of physics and simply vanished, leaving only unanswered questions and classified documents that remain locked away to this day. We are talking about a project that the United States Navy tried to bury, a technology that seemed to come from another world and that operated briefly before disappearing without a trace. This is the story of SSN 793, the submarine that should never have existed. 1989. The Cold War was drawing to a close, but in the secret corridors of the Pentagon and the underwater naval research facilities in Groton, Connecticut, something extraordinary was happening. Engineers and scientists were working on a project so secret that it didn't even appear in the Navy's classified budgets. Its code name was Project Abyss, and its objective was simple yet impossible: to create a submarine capable of diving to unprecedented depths and moving at speeds that defied all knowledge of hydrodynamics. The fundamental problem of any submarine has always been the same. The deeper you dive, the greater the pressure crushing the hull, and the faster you try to move underwater, the greater the resistance and drag that hold you back. The best nuclear submarines of the time could dive to about 600 meters and reach submerged speeds of perhaps 40 knots in extreme situations. But the plans for the SSN 793 spoke of an operational depth of 3,000 meters and sustained speeds of 120 knots. It was physically impossible, at least with human technology. In June of 1987, an event would change everything. An unidentified object was detected by Navy sonar in the North Atlantic, near the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The object was moving at impossible speeds at depths that should crush any known structure. A recovery team was sent after sensors indicated that the object had stopped moving. What they found remains classified, but persistent rumors speak of fragments of an underwater structure, pieces of a hull made of a material that no laboratory has been able to fully identify, a metallic alloy with properties that should not exist. The fragments were taken to secret facilities. Metallurgists were perplexed. The material was incredibly light, but when tested it withstood pressures equivalent to 10,000 meters of depth without deforming. Even stranger, the surface of the material seemed to interact with the water in a way never seen before, creating a microscopic layer that reduced hydrodynamic drag by percentages that scientists considered impossible. It was as if the material had been specifically designed for high-speed underwater movement. For 2 years, teams worked to understand and replicate that technology. They couldn't replicate it completely, but they did manage to create a functional version, a hybrid hull that incorporated some of the original fragments fused with terrestrial alloys. In parallel, the propulsion systems also underwent a revolution. The fragments contained what appeared to be part of a propulsion system based on unknown principles, something that generated fields that manipulated the water around the object. The engineers created a primitive version of that, a modified magnetohydrodynamic engine that worked in conjunction with a completely new, compact nuclear reactor design. In March of 1989, the SSN 793 was ready. It didn't resemble any submarine ever built. The hull had a strangely organic, almost fluid shape, covered in that hybrid material that shone with a slightly bluish hue under certain lights. It had no conventional propellers, only openings at the rear through which water was expelled at enormous pressures. It measured 140 meters in length, but weighed 40% less than nuclear submarines of similar size. The crew would be minimal, only 23 men, as much of the system was automated in ways never seen before. Initial tests were conducted in the deep waters of the Atlantic, far from commercial routes and prying eyes. Commander Richard Halloway, a veteran submariner with 27 years of service, was chosen to command that first cruise. In his classified report, Halloway described the experience as supernatural. The submarine dived in absolute silence, descending rapidly without the creaks and groans characteristic of hulls under extreme pressure. They reached 1,500 meters as if it were nothing. 2,000 meters. 2,500. The hull showed no sign of stress. Then came the speed tests. When the main propulsion system was activated at 100%, the crew felt a strange vibration, almost a low-frequency hum that seemed to resonate in their bones. The submarine began to accelerate. 30 knots, 50 knots, 80 knots. The sonar showed that they were leaving behind a minimal, almost undetectable cavitation wake. When they reached 115 knots at a depth of 2,000 meters, some crew members reported strange sensations: dizziness, temporal disorientation, a feeling that the surrounding space was distorting. For 3 months, the SSN 793 conducted test missions. Each dive revealed unsettling new capabilities. The submarine could remain completely still and silent in deep water, invisible to any known sonar. It could accelerate and maneuver in ways that should have been impossible for something of that size. The crew began reporting increasingly strange events. Instruments momentarily malfunctioning, compasses spinning for no reason, and that constant hum that seemed to affect some crew members more than others, causing vivid nightmares and sensations of presence. On June 5-10, 1989, the SSN 793 set sail for what would be its last documented mission. The order was simple: a long-duration cruise to the depths of the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest area of the Atlantic, to test the absolute limits of the submarine. Commander Holloway and his crew of 23 men departed Groton in complete silence. No official records, no documentation beyond classified reports that existed only on paper, never digitized. For the first 3 days, everything went according to plan. Coded radio reports arrived punctually every 12 hours. The submarine had reached the Puerto Rico Trench and was beginning progressively deeper dives. 3,000 meters. 4,000 meters. The reports mentioned that the hum was louder, that some instruments were showing anomalous readings, but that the hull remained intact. The last report arrived at 3:47 on June 19th. The message was short and disturbing. The SSN 793 had reached a depth of 6,200 meters and was experiencing what Commander Holloway described as localized gravitational anomalies. The water around the submarine seemed to be behaving strangely, creating density patterns that made no sense. The propulsion systems were operating on their own, responding to commands that no one had given. And then, the last sentence of the last message: "We are seeing lights down there, lights moving in formation, we are going to investigate." Total silence. No response to radio calls. No signal on the tracking systems. The SSN 793 had simply vanished. Search operations were launched immediately, but not publicly. Navy ships swept the area for weeks using the most advanced sonar available. Deep-sea submersibles were sent to investigate the region where the submarine had last been seen. Nothing was found. No wreckage, no sign of catastrophic implosion, no debris field. It was as if the submarine and its crew had simply ceased to exist. The following months were marked by a deafening official silence. The families of the 23 crew members were informed that their loved ones had died in a classified training accident. Benefits were paid, funerals were held with empty coffins, and orders of absolute silence were imposed on all who had any involvement with Project Abyss. The Bessing rolls were held with empty coffins, and orders of absolute silence were imposed on all who had any involvement with Project Abyss. The Sin de Revolmas were held with empty coffins, and orders of absolute silence were imposed with Project Bay. Original fragments of the alien material were transferred to an unknown location. All plans and specifications for SSN 793 were destroyed or buried under layers of Classification so deep that officially the project never existed. But the story didn't end there. In 1993, a Japanese oceanographic research vessel detected strange sonar echoes near the mid-Atlantic ridge, in the same general region where the original fragments had been recovered 6 years earlier. The echoes suggested a large object moving at impossible speeds at a depth of over 5,000 meters. In 1997, fishermen off the coast of Norway reported seeing something briefly emerge during the night. Something they described as a submarine with pulsating bluish lights along its hull before submerging again and disappearing. In 2003, seismic monitoring systems detected an anomalous acoustic signature in the South Pacific that some analysts swore was identical to the propulsion system patterns of SSN 793. To this day, documents related to Project Abyss remain classified. Freedom of information requests are routinely denied under national security arguments. The families of the crew members have never received complete answers about what really happened. And somewhere in the depths of the world's oceans, perhaps there still exists a submarine that should never have been built, sailing with a crew that has officially been dead for decades, or perhaps being operated by something entirely different, pursuing objectives we don't understand. The SSN 793 remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of modern naval history, a project that pushed the boundaries of technology beyond what humanity should have achieved at that time, utilizing knowledge that clearly did not originate from this world, and which ended in a way that defies any rational explanation, leaving only disturbing questions about what truly exists in the unexplored depths of our oceans and about how far the world's governments are willing to go to investigate. Technologies they find, even when those technologies carry risks they cannot predict or control. The years following the disappearance of SSN 793 were marked by a series of disturbing events that only deepened the mystery. In 2006, a former naval engineer named Dr. Marcus Chun, who had briefly worked on Project Abyss during its initial phase, decided to break his silence. Chun was dying of terminal cancer and apparently felt he had nothing left to lose. He contacted an investigative journalist and began to reveal specific details about the recovered fragments and what really happened during the submarine's construction. According to Chun, the fragments were not just advanced metal. They contained what appeared to be a kind of organic integrated circuit, a network of microscopic structures that vaguely resembled neural synapses. When scientists applied electrical current to the fragments, they detected response patterns that shouldn't exist in inert material. It was as if the fragments retained some kind of memory or even residual consciousness. Chun stated that some researchers began to believe that they had found not just wreckage from an alien spacecraft, but fragments of something that was alive or had been alive. Even more disturbing were Chun's revelations about the final days before the disappearance of SSN 793. He had access to internal reports that mentioned Commander Holloway had expressed growing concerns about the submarine's behavior. The automated systems occasionally made decisions without human input, always technically correct decisions but ones that had not been programmed. It was as if the submarine itself was learning, evolving. Holloway reportedly mentioned in a classified communication that he sometimes had the feeling that he was not commanding the submarine, but rather negotiating with it. 3 days after Chun began speaking with the journalist, he died suddenly. The official cause was complications from his cancer, but the journalist noticed something strange. All the digital files Chun had shared disappeared from the servers. Physical documents Chun kept were stolen from his home on the night of his death. And the journalist himself began receiving unofficial visits from men who identified themselves as national security agents, making it very clear that publishing anything about Project Abyss would be considered treason. The story would have ended there, buried along with Chun, if it weren't for an accidental discovery in 2011. A team of British oceanographers was mapping the ocean floor in the North Atlantic, using a new type of deep penetrating sonar when they detected something extraordinary. At approximately 6,800 meters deep, on the slopes of an underwater mountain, there was an anomaly. The rock formation showed signs of having been artificially modified, as if something had carved a cave or tunnel in the solid rock. More intriguingly, magnetic sensors detected concentrated metallic signatures in that area. The British, unaware of the full context, shared their findings with the international scientific community. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Within 48 hours, U.S. Navy ships arrived in the region and established an exclusion zone, citing classified military exercises. The British scientists were politely but firmly informed that their research in that specific area had ended. Data was confiscated, and confidentiality agreements were signed under veiled threats of diplomatic consequences. One of the British oceanographers, Dr. Sarah Blackwood, managed to hide a copy of the raw data before it was all confiscated. Years later, she would share this information with independent researchers. The data showed something impossible to ignore. The underwater cave was not natural, and the magnetic readings were consistent with the presence of an active nuclear reactor, but a reactor operating at frequencies that did not correspond to any known American, Russian, Chinese, or any other nation's submarine design. And there was something else: periodic acoustic signals emanating from the cave, a pattern of low-frequency sounds that repeated every 72 hours. Underwater acoustics experts who anonymously analyzed the data were perplexed. The sounds were neither random noise nor natural patterns. They had structure, complexity, almost as if they were a form of communication. One researcher suggested that the patterns were similar to digital data transmissions, but using frequencies and modulations that did not correspond to any known communication protocol. When they tried to decode the patterns using advanced encryption algorithms, the computers began to exhibit erratic behavior, crashing or restarting without apparent explanation. In 2014, the most disturbing account of all emerged. A crew member of an American Virginia-class nuclear submarine operating in the Atlantic reported during a psychological debriefing session that his submarine had had a close encounter with something inexplicable. During a routine patrol at approximately 1,200 meters depth, passive sensors detected another vessel approaching rapidly. The acoustic signature did not match any known submarine, and the speed was impossible, over 100 knots in deep water. The commander of the Virginia ordered total silence and passive observation. What happened in the following minutes would be documented in classified reports that were partially leaked years later. The object passed less than 200 meters from the American submarine, and for the first time the crew obtained a clear reading from the sensors. The profile roughly corresponded to the size of SSN 793, but there were significant differences. The hull appeared to have grown or been modified with protrusions and extensions that were not in the original plans. And the energy readings were absurd, suggesting a reactor operating at levels that should cause catastrophic meltdown. The most disturbing part came when the unknown submarine suddenly stopped and remained motionless for almost 5 minutes, as if aware of the Virginia's presence and studying it. The American submarine's communication systems began to pick up interference, and for brief moments, unsolicited data began to appear on computer screen sequences of numbers and symbols that made no sense. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the object accelerated and disappeared into the depths, descending at impossible angles toward the abyss. The crew member who reported the incident mentioned something that was omitted from the official report, but which circulated among submariners through informal channels. During those 5 minutes of mutual observation, some crew members swore they heard sounds through the hull, not transmitted by radio or sonar, but sounds that seemed to come directly from the metal around them, vibrations that formed almost words, a distorted voice repeating geographical coordinates and a date, March 18, 2024. That date became obsessively monitored by a small group of independent researchers and former military personnel who believed that SSN 793 was still operational. March 18, 2024, came and went without any obvious public event. But seismic records from that day show an intriguing anomaly, a series of low-magnitude disturbances detected simultaneously by monitoring stations around the world, all originating from a point in the Pacific Ocean, approximately 4,000 meters deep near the Mariana Trench. Ocean observation satellites captured unusual thermal images of that region in the following hours. Patches of surface water with slightly elevated temperatures forming a perfect circular pattern almost 2 kilometers in diameter, as if something massive had emerged from the depths, remained on the surface briefly, and then submerged again. Ships that passed through the area in the following days reported unexplained malfunctions in electronic equipment and compasses spinning uncontrollably. Today, more than 3 decades after its official disappearance, the SSN 793 remains a ghost haunting the oceans. Sporadic reports continue to surface, always from sources who prefer to remain anonymous, always describing sightings of a submarine that moves in impossible ways, emits that characteristic bluish light, and seems to be carrying out some mission that no one but it understands. Some believe that the original crew is still alive, kept in stasis by alien technology, or simply adapted to survive in the depths in ways we don't comprehend. Others suggest that the submarine has long since ceased to be controlled by humans and now operates autonomously, perhaps following alien programming that was latent in the fragments and was activated during that last dive in June 1989. There are also those who propose the most disturbing theory of all, that the SSN 793 encountered something in the depths during that last mission, something that the lights mentioned by Commander Holloway represented, and that whatever it was, it decided that this hybrid submarine, part human technology, part alien technology, would be the perfect bridge between two worlds. And that since then the submarine has served as an ambassador or explorer for intelligences inhabiting the deepest and most unexplored regions of our oceans, places where the pressure and darkness are so absolute that no human being can go, but where perhaps other life forms, other civilizations, have existed for millennia without us ever knowing. The files remain sealed, the questions remain unanswered. And somewhere in the liquid darkness that covers 70% of our planet, the impossible submarine may still be sailing, carrying secrets that humanity may never be ready to know. And perhaps that is the true lesson that SSN 793 left us. We have covered only 5% of the ocean floor. We know more about the surface of Mars than about the abyssal trenches that exist right beneath our feet. While we look to the stars searching for extraterrestrial life, we ignore the liquid depths of our own planet, where pressure crushes, where light never penetrates, where entire ecosystems exist in conditions we would consider impossible for life. And now we know, or at least suspect, that when we encounter technology we don't understand and decide to use it anyway, the consequences can be far beyond what we imagine. 23 men set off in a machine built with alien knowledge, and perhaps they discovered that this knowledge came with a price, a purpose, a calling they could not refuse. Their names are engraved on a secret memorial somewhere on the Groton facility, honoring men officially killed in an accident that officially never happened, crew members of a submarine that officially never existed, lost on a mission that was officially never authorized. And while you sleep peacefully tonight, somewhere in the absolute darkness of the oceans, something continues to move. Something continues to fulfill a mission that began more than 3 decades ago and may never end, carrying secrets that connect our world to realities we are not yet prepared to face.